Hi, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis on March 14th, 2021. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Cattleya amethystoglossa. Do a little show and tell of two of my favorite plants actually that I own in my collection. One is a diploid, so it only has the regular set of chromosomes, and one is a polyploid, so it has an extra set of chromosomes. And I actually did a comparison video last year of the two outside the greenhouse where I had them side by side, and I could show you the differences much more easily. A polyploid plant is going to be much larger. It's going to be much larger flowers, and just generally is a more awardable flower because of those size differences. But the diploids are absolutely stunning in their own right. And when I turn the camera around to show you guys, you'll see what I mean. In fact, last year, when I did the comparison video, I was kind of shouting into the camera because I was standing a little far away and you couldn't really hear me very well. But a viewer mentioned to me a couple of videos ago that, hey, maybe I should get a microphone, which I've done. So we're getting fancy here on the channel. But basically, it's just, a little investment so y'all can hear me a little more easily, hopefully a little more consistently as well. But today I want to compare and contrast the two flowers. I want to talk to you a little bit about cultural information, and I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of the different color types and breeding lines that you can see and which ones I prefer, and maybe where you can get some of those. So let's turn the camera around. All right, so we have the diploids there on the bottom. You can already see right off the bat that the plant's a little shorter and the flowers are a little smaller than the polyploid. The polyploid didn't have quite as nice a bloom this year because of the freeze. I lost a bunch of buds that blasted when I had to bring them inside, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. But first, let's start with the polyploid. As you can see, this is just absolutely stunning. One of my favorite plants in my whole collection. I think I even like it better than the polyploid. It's just such a great flower. The color on this is stunning. Puts out these nice heads of flowers. I've got 3 spikes. There's one here in the foreground and then 2 back there. Let me see if I can zoom in on one of these flowers a little bit so you can see a little more closely what I'm talking about. Nice light colored variety, a little bit of yellow in there. I don't know if you can see it much. Some years the yellow shows up a little more than in other years, but most of the varieties that you see will have much more pink. So this is a pale colored variety, and it's in fact the parents are Palha by Palina, and I believe that's Portuguese for pale by Little Pale. And this one comes from my friend Sergio Garcia over there at Olom Poly Orchids. I don't recall if he has more of these in stock, but I got this from him in 2013, I believe. And just, like I said, just stunning. He has such amazing breeding stock. He has his plants come from some of the best Cattleya breeding lines in Brazil. And you can really see that, especially the close-up of this plant. You can see that there's this sort of amethyst or more magenta lip here, and it does feel like hard plastic, and it's really cool. You can see all those little bumps, little ridges. Super cool. The petals and sepals are fairly firm, and what I really like about this breeding line is the Brazilian breeding line. You see the spots are very distinct, hard edges to those spots. They don't really bleed into the rest of the flower, and you'll notice that from the Brazilians. They seem to really like that, as well as H&R orchids, and the polyploid is from H&R, but again, I'll talk about that more in a moment. I really like this breeding line in terms of having the spots be very kind of small and more numerous. rather than what I call the Florida breeding lines. And the Florida breeding lines have these larger spots, sort of more like blotches really, that cover up a significant part of the flower. And if you compare the two, they're really noticeable, at least to me, to the point of where I can even guess where somebody got a flower just from the size of the spots, because the breeding lines are so distinctive to one another. You know, and the Florida one, I'm not saying that the Florida one is bad. I just prefer the H&R one that, you know, obviously takes a lot of the Brazilian lines into their breeding program. Let's see if we can see some of the yellow in the throat there, a little bit. But really powerfully fragrant. I would describe the fragrance as being quite a bit different than most Cattleyas. You know, a lot of the bifoliates have really sweet scents. You know, Leopoldii, which is renamed again Tigrina, has an intensely sweet fragrance. You know, the complex floofy Cattleyas or the unifoliate Cattleyas have a very strong anise scent typically. You know, mixed with a lot of floral scents. These guys are very different. This is more of a musky scent, I think. I really like it. I could see how someone wouldn't necessarily enjoy it quite as much. You know, if you like Rhynchostylus gigantea, that sort of musky fragrance, you'll probably like these guys. Similar in certain ways, but still different. Just really nice. I love it. Absolutely love it. Let's bump up to, actually before I go to the polyploid, let's get my hand in here just for a size comparison. You can see how large these flowers are. And then immediately over here, you can see how much larger these flowers are, the polyploids. Now, like I mentioned, you can see the brown back there where the buds used to be. When I brought these guys in for our recent Texas freeze, you know, the buds, for whatever reason, didn't like that on this flower, so I lost most of them. But, you know, I thank my lucky stars that that's as bad as it got for me. A lot of people lost their entire collections, which would just be devastating. So if all I lost was a few buds, I'm, again, just thanking my lucky stars. But you can see just how much larger these guys are. Again, you can see the magenta lip here with a lot of really cool bumps. And the polyploid flowers, in addition to being larger flowers on larger plants, they typically are much firmer when you feel the segments. I mean, this feels like plastic all on its own, whereas the other petals and sepals in the diploid are not nearly this tough. And so this is the breeding standard. So if you're thinking about getting your plants judged and you don't have a polyploid, I don't want to discourage you. I think you should still take it in for judging, but be prepared to have it not pointed. As stunning as these are, the judges last weekend said, thanks, but no thanks. We're not even going to look at them because it's just not up to the size that other awarded plants are receiving, you know. This is the size that you need, and the flower count has to be really high. So this spike here on this diploid might be considered a low flower count for a spike of an awardable plant. So the species has a lot of awards, and so the judges are pretty picky these days. I pointed out the lip on this one a moment ago, but I also want to point out the spots. So this one is from H&R Orchids. H&R probably has the best breeding program of this species in the United States. And again, you can see that these spots are very distinct. They have very hard edges compared to the other colors. They don't sort of bleed into the petals there. They are very distinctive. And again, it's that breeding line that I really like. From H&R, from the Brazilians, and is different from the Florida breeding. So a little bit about care. These plants like it hot and they like it bright. You want your leaves to be a fairly light green, as you can see. If it's a dark green, it needs more sun. If it's not blooming and it is mature size, it's probably needing more light. They want to dry off quickly at the roots. And let me duck down here so we can take a look at the size of the pots. And so when you see the pot comparison of these two plants, not only are the flowers differently sized, as I mentioned, the plant size is much larger on the polyploid than the diploid, and the pot size is enormous. You can see why I didn't feel like moving this guy and this guy out into, to shoot a video outside of the greenhouse. It's an adventure, and I've already moved these guys around a bunch with the recent weather we've had. So something to think about when you are deciding if you want to have Cattleya amethystoglossa. Do you have room for a mature plant that's a polyploid? Or maybe if you don't have as much room, maybe you want the diploid. Both of these plants are about the same age. This one, I think this one bloomed later for me. So this one bloomed a little younger, a little earlier. And I chopped this one up last year and sold it to a friend in Houston. His plant is about to bloom as well. So, these guys do, like I said, they want bright, hot conditions. You'll notice the bulbs are thin. These aren't really bulbs. They look more like canes. And that gives you an indication of their drought tolerance, which is significantly less than for other Cattleyas that have big bulbs. And of course, I'm looking over my shoulder here at the Nobiliores and Walkerianas with big bulbs and significant drought tolerance. The bifoliates don't have that much drought tolerance. They're not as able to withstand long periods of dry weather in the wild. So you should remember that when you are giving them a winter rest. Maybe it shouldn't be quite as hard a rest as some of the other species. In fact, I've found that these guys will continue to grow all winter long if you give them enough water. They don't really have a rest season. I think letting them dry off in the wintertime a little bit more than during the summertime is a good idea, especially if you have cooler temperatures and you worry about the cooler temperatures negatively impacting your plants. These guys took temperatures down to 40 degrees with no problem, and they seem to do just fine, especially if they have dry roots. That's important during the winter season. So all things to think about when you are thinking about purchasing one of these, or if you are purchasing one, or if you already have them. It's good to know about these things. I don't find them to be too bad with pests. Scale and mealies can show up, especially this time of the year. Let me see if I can zoom in. You see those spots there on the leaves? Those are scale. And that's about the extent that I get. Some of my other plants this time of year get it really bad. Let me zoom in on some mealybugs. You can see right there. So it's not a terrible infestation, but they do happen. So those are the kind of things that you're going to want to think about, especially if you're growing indoors during the hot, dry season. During the winter season when your interior humidities are probably low. This guy, all of my plants will get kicked outside during the summer months, and the lizards and natural predators take care of the pests. And I generally don't have to worry about pests when growing outside, at least not the pests that we think about when we're growing our orchids. I have other things like grasshoppers and squirrels and such, but there's not much I can do about those guys. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about culture, about breeding lines, about how to grow this species and what it takes. Hopefully I gave a pretty good explanation, but if you have questions, let me know. Talk to you later.